Okay, guys, thank you. How you doing? Since book tour and conventions were pretty much canceled for a bit, I figured I was going to bring book tour to you guys. So, welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster, intriguing interviews with creative minds. So, with us tonight is my friend, fellow Crazy 8 Press inmate, and the author of young adult science fiction and fantasy novels, short stories, and anthologies, Mary Fan. Hello, Mary.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No, great. This is excellent. So, Mary, so just so everyone knows, where are you tonight?
Jersey City.
Jersey City. Okay, I'm in New Jersey as well, so we're all together here. Great. So, let's just jump right in. Let's just get a little bit of background on you, Mary, so everyone gets to know you just a little bit better. So, where were you born and where'd you grow up? Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, well, the question to where I'm from is, the answer is always, it's complicated because I was born in California when my parents were PhD students at Berkeley. And then at some point when I was like 2 or 3, we spent some time in Pennsylvania. I have no memory of this. Apparently it happened. And then eventually we wound up in North Carolina when I was about 4 because my dad got a position there as a professor at the university at UNC, University of North Carolina. And so I was there until freshman year of high school. So I guess you could say that's where I grew up because that's where I went from like, little toddler to teenager. But then I came to Jersey for high school, went to PHS, Princeton High School, and then went to the local university, also in Princeton. Might have heard of it. And I kind of haven't left Jersey since, except for a 1-year stint in Beijing.
So when were you in Beijing and why were you there?
That was for my first job out of college because I graduated in 2010, which was technically after the recession, but definitely still felt like a recession if you were a new college grad and looking for a job and competing with all the 09s and 08s. So I was like, where can I get a job? Apparently the answer was on the other side of the planet.
So what were you actually doing in Beijing? Why there?
Because my dad knew a guy who was hiring for their hedge funds analytics team.
And so you were already so what was your degree in from Princeton?
Music.
So how does a music major get into finance?
Because I actually, like at any other university, I would have been a double major for music and either economics or finance. But because Princeton is special, they only let you choose one major. And I kind of wanted to hedge my bets, music was where my heart was. It was what I really wanted to do at the time. At the same time, I was like having trouble seeing that as a viable career because let's face it, it's music. So I had taken all these econ courses and finance courses, and I wasn't sure which one I was going to major in until like my junior year, and it came time to declare a thesis, and I decided to do my thesis in music because frankly, it was more fun. But I was glad I had the econ fallback because when it came time to look for a job, it was like, yeah, I do have skills, see?
So in Beijing, so where were you exactly in Beijing? So like, what was your situation? Like, where were you living? I don't know Beijing, I've never been there.
So Beijing is arranged in rings around like the Forbidden Palace. And kind of the closer you are to the palace, the higher up you are. And I forget how many there are total, but my office was in the financial district in the third ring, which is kind of like one of those swanky parts. For example, I don't know if you guys have seen the giant like CCTV tower that's there. It's like one of the most famous structures in China. It's like right across. It's the one that burned down like 10 years ago and it was like a huge scandal. Apparently people in my office saw it burn down. That's how close we are to it.
Wow.
The gym we used for like our corporate gym was frequented by local movie stars. So it was a swanky part of town. Wow. I did not live in that swanky part of town. I lived out in the sixth ring.
So what's the transportation like out there? Was it just, is it subway or is that how you got around?
Beijing is huge, like enormous, just geographically speaking. Like it's just a giant piece of land. And in terms of public transit, I would usually, there was a subway and I did take that, but the subway it was not like, in New York City where you could like, take a subway and for the most part be within like, a 10, 15-minute walk of where you want to go. I have to take a subway and then hail a cab to drive me 20 minutes to my apartment.
Whoa. So you did that for a year. What brought you back to the States? What was the transition like?
Frankly, I kind of just got homesick and with a year of experience under my belt, I was able to, get a job more local than Beijing. So I just
So what was that like for you? So, born in California, migrated to New Jersey, and then you go to Beijing, and then you come back to the States. Did that have a lasting impact on you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first of all, the cultures are quite different. For instance, I don't know about like other parts of China, like Shanghai, for example, probably have a vibrant nightlife. Not so in Beijing. Like everybody just pretty much like just goes to bed at like 9 o'clock. Also while I was in Beijing, I was working weird hours because we had to sync up with the New York office. So for example, I'd be working from like 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. so that I could have a 9 p.m. New York 9 a.m. meeting with New York.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it was really weird. But that's also the reason why I was able to get started with my writing.
Which brings us to the next section. So that was a perfect transition. Thank you for that. Was a nice segue. So we're going actually right into the writer life segment of the show. So you mentioned writing. So you had a little bit of a interesting transition in life. When did you really first get serious about writing? When was it become like a burning passion for you, or was it always?
So I guess I like to think of my writing career, if you can call it that, in two phases. Phase one was, the childhood dreamer, the little kid who was like, Mommy, I made a book. And then when I was 12, I decided I am going to write a book. I am a big kid now. I could totally write a whole novel. And I did. And it was 100,000 words long. So good job, 12-year-old me, considering you were 12.
You wrote your first 100,000 word novel at 12.
Yes. It was terrible, but it was written.
Okay. What was it about?
It was basically Galaxy Quest fanfic, except of course with all the names changed, and a self-insert character so that you could have a 12-year-old on a spaceship.
So what was the 12-year-old character's name?
Cassandra.
Cassandra? Cassandra. So
she was psychic, and I thought I was being really clever. Cassandra the psychic.
And what was her role in this whole big adventure?
So the big adventure was that, spaceship from Earth, and then there's, the commander, and the commander has a kid, and I was a kid.
So was this just sort of wish fulfillment? Was it, was it just goofing around? Like, where do you think that, because there's a theme in some of your writing that I want to get into, but so you started at sort of a younger age, and that's sort of an ambitious thing to do, to write 100,000 word, space adventure where your alter ego is a psychic out in this big space adventure. So where do you think some of that came from?
Well, I'd always liked things with magic or, robots or spaceships, like out of this world stuff, like contemporary stuff just bored me when I was a kid because, I didn't need contemporary. I could just look around and that's my life. And I think also because a lot of contemporary kidlit written in the 90s was written for little white girls that I just could not relate to. Meanwhile, kid going off into space, like no one can really relate to that, but they could always dream about being that. So I think that was part of it too. And I discovered sci-fi when I was around 12 after reading the Wishbone version of Legion of Space. And then I went to my library and devoured like a lot of like golden age sci-fi novels because I was a nerd, and that's what you do when you're a nerd, you just read all the books. And then when I decided, I want to write one of these too. Of course, it had to be in a spaceship, and of course, I wanted to put myself on the spaceship, and that's kind of where this character came from.
So when you were a kid and sort of this, one of these, another sci-fi nerd, because interesting, I didn't start reading sci-fi till I got older. Did you have a lot of friends, a lot of nerd, friends, or were you sort of isolated by yourself?
All by myself.
You.
Yep.
Just you.
I was that loser kid who would spend lunchtime in the library with my nose buried in a book.
So I'm assuming there probably weren't a lot of Asian American sci-fi nerds in North Carolina when you were growing up.
I should add that.
Or were there?
I should add that all this took place when I was in Hong Kong. I forgot that part of my life. I spent the year of 7th grade in Hong Kong.
I just forgot. I lived in Hong Kong.
Oops.
Oops. Wait, so go back. When were you in Hong Kong, and why were you there?
That was, so it was my 7th grade year, so I would have been like 12, 13, like that age range. And it was, so I guess you could call me a university brat because I basically just follow my dad to whichever university he ends up at. So he was doing a stint, he was still like a full professor at UNC, but CUHK, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, had hired him to do like a year there. So he like kind of went on sabbatical or whatever. I don't know what the technical terms are, but basically he was doing like a year-long stint in Hong Kong, and he and my mom thought it would be good cultural exposure for me and my sister.
Did that make being in Beijing later a little bit easier?
I think so, just because like I knew like I've done this whole international thing before and I can do it again.
Okay, so going back a little bit to what you were talking about, about you started off being this, this sort of young kid who sort of wanted to insert yourself in this grand galactic adventure. So you typically write, and I know a fair bit about your work at this point, you typically write about intrepid heroines and stories that are filled with a mixture of science fiction, fantasy, action, and romance. You definitely like the feels. So what draws you to the romance? Like I get the sci-fi and the fantasy part of it and the adventure and the action. So what draws you to the romance, to the feels part of it?
So when I started writing, that was a little bit unexpected because my first book that was published, Artificial Absolutes, is actually about a sibling team. And the reason I made them siblings was specifically so I would not have to have romance. I was like, I want like a male and female team, but I don't want any like moonlight BS. So I'm going to make them siblings. So that's not even a factor.
Right.
Little did I know was I going to then give both of them love interests and end up writing a romance anyway. And I think it comes from the fact, so I have a very long classical music background. I started playing violin at age 3. And of course, classical music is all about that romance. And I love classical music. Like it's been in my life for literally as long as I can remember. And I think just when I sat down to write, it just came out. I was like, I loved playing Romeo and Juliet in orchestra. I loved playing, Swan Lake and all that. And
right.
Yeah.
And music can be really evocative, and it can sort of tap into those deep sort of grand gestures and operatic themes. And sounds like maybe it's sort of like it infused inside you and got mixed up with all the sci-fi fantasy, almost sort of like it's jumbled together where you can't even pull the pieces apart anymore. They fused into something almost like its own organism within your writing life.
Yep, exactly. And so then I just stopped trying and was like, that's it, I'm a romance author.
No, that's interesting though. Do you identify yourself as or describe yourself as a romance author who happens to write sci-fi and fantasy, or maybe the reverse, or just sci-fi romance, or do you just not even think of it that way?
I would say just because romance is such a specific category with, its own rules and whatnot, I would say I'm a sci-fi fantasy author who, has a heavy dose of romance just because I know I don't follow the classic tropes of the romance category as like RWA would define it, for example. And definitely some of my books are more romantic than others. Like Star Swept was a full-blown romance. Then its sequel came along and was not.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so let's shift to now. So tell me, I know you like me are always working on something. What are you working on now? What's keeping you busy?
What's keeping me busy, one sec, I have the picture on my phone and it was all pulled up, but then my phone decided to revert to its home screen. There it is. Badass Mom. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see that. That is, I
it
have to
looks
say,
familiar to you.
it does look familiar. In fact, I think if I'm recalling correctly, I might have something to do with this, but I'll let you talk about it. So tell us, what is Badass Moms? What's it about? Give us the rundown.
So Badass Moms is a collection of 20-ish short stories about exactly what it sounds like, badass moms. And the idea was that we really want to shine a spotlight on moms because you don't see a lot of mother figures in sci-fi fantasy, or even in fiction in general, outside of maybe women's fiction. There's just sort of this idea that once a woman becomes a mom, she's a mom. That's her role. And so I was like, that's BS. So the concept actually came about a couple years ago so I also co-edit this other anthology series called Brave New Girls about young girls in STEM. And me and my co-editor were kind of looking at a lot of these submissions and noticing that a lot of them had dead moms. And that's, a pretty common trope in kid lit. Right. And it's kind of understandable, the authors are trying to find a way to get rid of the parent figures so that the kid can like go off on an adventure. But we were also just like, what's with all the dead moms? We should just make an anthology full of moms. So then when it came to be my turn to edit the Crazy 8 Press anthology, I was like, all right, I already have a concept, badass moms.
And wait, and tell me that, and tell everyone the tagline, because I love it.
This book is a real mother.
I just love that. All right, this is great. So within this, so you've got what, about 20 stories within this collection, correct?
Yeah, I always forget if it's 21 or 22. That's why I always just say 20-ish.
Okay. Now, what are they all, are they all science fiction and fantasy, or are they across different genres? Just sort of walk us through it a little bit more.
Sure. So they're cross genre. I mean, I gave the authors, as you know, exactly one criteria was it needs to be about a badass mom. Whatever that means to you, whatever badass means to you, whatever mom means to you. So for some people, they wrote about, a biological mother, the classic idea of a mom. Some wrote about grandmothers, who are also moms, but tend to get left out of the spotlight. And some wrote about like mom figures. Like, for example, Bob Greenberger wrote about a coach, a female coach. And so as a result, we have this really cool mix of stories. Like we've got sci-fi, we've got fantasy, we've also got contemporary and a little historical. And then within fantasy too, we've got like a lot of different types of fantasy. Like we've got superhero, we've got urban fantasy. So it's really a mixed bag.
Huh, interesting. So who's in it?
You.
Oh, me? No.
Yeah, we've got 20-ish authors, like I said, and it would take too long to name everybody. I'd probably forget someone and feel really bad. But essentially, it's the Crazy 8 crew, the 8 of us, and a lot of awesome guest authors, including Keith DeCandido, who I believe is on the line, and a bunch of our other like sci-fi fantasy friends.
So I get the impetus for it. So for those of you who don't, want to tell the folks who are listening and who hopefully will be watching this recording later, the background behind the anthologies of Crazy 8 Press and kind of how it kind of fell into your lap.
Sure. So Crazy 8 Press predates my writing career. I think it started in 2012 or something, when basically something like that, when a bunch of y'all sci-fi writers met at a con and decided you were going to form this crazy press. I'm actually not that clear on our origin story. I just know it has something to do with a guy in the audience saying, here's the first line of your first book. All of y'all going like, okay, we're going to sit down in a literal little brick nook at the convention and pass a laptop around and write the story. So I think that's our founding myth, is something like 8 guys at a convention sitting in a nook, on the floor with a laptop, writing a story, and then each one passing it on to the next one to write the next 1,000 words or whatever.
So now that Crazy 8 Press, there's 8 of us, we've got about 100 books in total between all of us. But on the anthologies, there's a rotating schedule where each of the members, theoretically anyway, is supposed to take their turn being the editor, publisher, coming up with the idea. So you could have written about anything else. Did you have other ideas for anthologies that you were sort of debating, one versus the other, or is this sort of this is the one you really wanted to do?
That was the one, and it's because, so I've been doing Brave New Girls since 2015, and I think the idea for Badass Moms came up casually in conversation around 2017, which was before I kind of got involved in Crazy 8 Press. So I kind of had it in the back of my mind. I was like, man, I really wish I could do this Badass Moms anthology. It'd be awesome. I just don't know when or how I do it. So kind of the minute you guys were like, oh, and one day it'll be your turn to edit an anthology, I was like, just the thing.
Okay, fair. So you said something interesting, and I wanted to go into a little bit of a deeper conversation here, because I know you've had some thoughts on this as well. Given the way the world is, today, of course, it's upside down and bonkers, but even predating this whole COVID madness. So you're really giving women, mothers and mother figures, the spotlight, which indeed are poorly underrepresented in science fiction, fantasy, and probably in fiction in general, which kind of leads to a broader topic. So, you're out there you're an author, but you also go to conventions as a fan. As an author, you engage on social media, and you're involved in the broader conversation. What's your take? There's been this issue of this toxic masculinity, which I know really kind of has a touch point for you, but this is really, is this book sort of maybe a counterpoint to that sort of toxic masculinity? Are they unrelated? What's your thoughts here?
You know what's funny is I never set out to be a feminist. Like, I remember there was actually a period of time when the word feminist, when somebody would sort of direct it in my direction, I'd be like, huh? Who, me? I never took women's studies. Like, what are you talking about? I guess the thing is, though, is that so my mom is very, like, independent and, strong-willed, and she kind of raised me to be the same way. And, a lot of it's just personality, too. And I never thought I couldn't do what the boys could. And so when people started saying, you can't do that because you're a girl, I'm like, what? Excuse you? And I guess that makes me a feminist.
Okay, so let's shift a little bit. So we're here talking about we're writers talking about writing. So let's talk about your process. So you write quite a bit, but when you actually write, am I a little dark here? Did I lose my light here?
I mean, you look a little ghostly, but I can see you.
There we go. I'm actually going to turn the light on. Hang on one sec.
See, I knew it was going to get dark because I've done this before, and that's why I already had my light on at a perfect glow.
There we go. Okay. Not perfect, but I'll do the best I can with what I got. Nope,
next time, try not to be backlit.
Sorry, guys.
See, one of us works in digital marketing, and one of us does not.
I know. Well, we'll do without. Sorry, guys. You'll have to live with it. So let me ask you. So you sit down to write. Are you a longhand person? Are you a laptop person? What's your physical process here?
I'm definitely a laptop person. I've had laptops since I first started writing. So when I was 12 and I wrote that first 100,000 word opus, this was around 2000. So it was like not everybody had laptops then, but because my dad was a professor, he always, got the latest tech through his university, and he would hand off his old laptops to me. So I've just always had a laptop, and it never occurred to me to use anything else.
Do you write at a desk? Do you write on a chair, on the floor? Like, where do you actually do your clacking of the keys?
I write on my couch, sitting sideways across it, reclining like a Roman.
Are you a nighttime writer, a morning writer, or do you just do it whenever you can? How does your process work?
I am not just a night owl, but something of an extreme night owl. Like, my sweet spot is around 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., which doesn't really jive with having a day job, but we do what we can.
So are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? And for those who are not familiar with pantser, that's writing by the seat of your pants, making it up as you go. Or are you a combination of the both?
You know what? My process has evolved over the years. Like, if you'd asked me that question when I first started when I started this current phase of writing about 8 years ago, I would have said I was a die-hard plotter because, blank pages scare the bejesus out of me. And I'm also just an overthinker in general. So I used to do this thing where I'd have a brainstorm and it would just be like bullet points. And then I'd flesh that out into like, okay, here's like a list of events. And then I'd break that up into chapters. And then I'd flesh out the chapters. I would end up with a 10,000 word outline. And then I think it was around the time I wrote the book that came out last year, Stronger Than a Bronze Dragon. I sat down to like write that one, and I just started writing because I just had this idea, and I was like, I don't want to waste time outlining. Like, I just want to get started. I was like too excited. And ever since then, it's been like a kind of a weird combination where I'll brainstorm a bit. I might chop some things up into chapters, or I might just wing it, just depending on my mood.
Fair enough. Okay. So now we're going to have a little fun. We're going to have some games. We're going to spin the wheel. Now, I actually bought a spinning wheel. Unfortunately, it didn't come yet. So we're just going to do a random generator. Sorry about that. That's just the way life goes sometimes. But I've renumbered. There's seven categories, which there's 2 lies and a truth, stranger danger, would you rather, pass that law, iconic roles, fear of flying, and space meal. I've renumbered them 1 to 7. Give me a number. You'll get your category.
7.
7. Okay. 7 is fear of flying. All right. So you're on an airplane and the pilot passes out. The flight attendants say they need you to take over. Do you hop in the pilot's chair and have the tower talk you through it? Or do you grab a parachute and jump for your life?
Knowing me, I would take the chair, talk to the person on the other end, and probably sound really calm while doing it, while secretly going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Okay, well, so I'll make sure that if I'm ever in a plane that you're somewhere in the vicinity. Okay, great. So, advice column. So Mary, we're getting close to the end here. We're in the business of writing. we've been doing it for most of our lives, and there's a lot of writers out there. So what's the best and the worst advice anyone ever gave you about writing?
I'll start with the worst, which is you have to write every single day. I hate that. That is BS. Like, it works for some people, and for those people, I congratulate you. But it doesn't work for everybody. And to like kind of impose that on everyone and then make them feel like they're slacking if they're not writing at least a paragraph a day or whatever, like, it doesn't sound like a lot, but just to get into headspace, it can be taxing. You know, you get busy. Like, sometimes you just don't have it in you to write every single day. So that's why I'm like, you know what? It is BS that you have to write every single day. Like, I'm a feast or famine writer. I will either write like 5,000 words in a day or nothing.
Fair enough. And the best?
And the best.
Sorry.
You know
Go ahead,
what?
keep talking.
That's a hard one. There is a lot of great advice out there. I would say, you know, write what you know, but not in the way most people think about it. Like, a lot of people take write what you know very literally. Like, they mean, oh, you know, you have to write about a woman living in an apartment in New Jersey to write what you know. But I say write what you know as in write what you're passionate about. Write what, you know, you would really be interested in learning more about, because that's what's going to, you know, really get you invested in the research and in the plotting that it takes to write a book.
Well, I can't argue with anything that you're saying, and I wouldn't dare to argue with you.
I know.
I know that. I know it all too well.
Yeah,
all right.
Light.
Oh, this is for those at home. I'm actually in my wife's office, because normally I'd be in the basement in my man cave, but I have terrible Wi-Fi down there. I'm having a hard line installed next week, so starting with the next show, I should probably be downstairs. I already had the lighting set up, but we do what we can. All right, so we're on the deadline. 3 questions. Ready? Other than writing, what are your hobbies?
Aerial arts and choir and kickboxing.
Okay, so we know a little bit about the music. Talk to me about the kickboxing and the aerial arts.
So kickboxing, I first took it up about, I think, I don't know, 8 years ago or something, but never really seriously. So it's just something I do for fun, like just to work out, because I get very bored doing normal workouts, and it's a lot more fun kicking and punching things. And then aerial arts was kind of random. I took it up about 1.5 years ago. It was actually my sister who got me into it. Like, she wanted to try a class just for the heck of it. And I was like, sure. And I got hooked.
So for those who don't know, what is aerial arts? How does this work?
So if you've ever seen like in Cirque du Soleil, when they have like those 2 long pieces of cloth, they kind of look like giant ribbons, and then there's somebody tangled up in it. Yeah, that's what I do. Oh, and also flying trapeze.
I've seen the videos, and as I say often, you give me a heart attack every time you do it. Okay, so what piece of music or song resonates with you no matter how many times you hear it?
Oh, goodness, there's so many. I'm gonna have to go back to one I used to listen to a lot when I was in, oh my goodness, Boulevard of Broken Dreams. I was blanking on the title for a second. It's a really like angsty high school song, but I think because it's been a part of my life for so long, that's why every time I hear it, I'm like, I just feel like an angsty 16-year-old again, and that can be fun sometimes.
That's amazing. I mean, I love the song myself. I don't strike you as a Green Day person, but okay.
Oh yeah, I was a big punk listener back in high school and college.
Huh. See, who knew? All the years I've known you, I wouldn't have guessed. Okay, so last, do you like to travel? And I know that you do. So if so, what was one of the most memorable trips that you've ever taken?
There's quite a few, but since we are on the topic of sci-fi and fantasy in a way, I'm going to talk about the time I went to Ireland in 2018. So that, well, first of all, I'd always wanted to see Ireland because it's a beautiful country and I love the music. But then after The Force Awakens came out and I found out that they filmed that last shot of Rey and Luke on an island and it was a real island, I was like, I have to go to that island and I'm going to go in costume. And I did.
Oh, of course you did. Wow, that is fantastic. Okay, great. So we're really coming down to the end. So you ready? Shameless promotion. This has been a great half hour. Go ahead, pimp away.
All right. Find me on my website, maryfan.com. Badass Moms, the anthology I was talking about, will be coming out at the beginning of July, and keep an eye out for that. And yeah, find me on Twitter at AstralCult.
Where can we find when Badass Moms comes out? How can folks get it?
it will be available in ebook and paperback on the usual online retailers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iBooks, Kobo, Scribd. I could keep going.
All right. Well, great. Well, Mary, I want to thank you so much for being the guinea pig on my show. I know we had a few glitches, but what can you do? As for me, for those of you guys, and who do you got there?
This is Dorian. He finally came over to say hi.
Oh, there you go. Hey, Dorian, what's up? So I'm going to be signing off in a minute, folks. I'm Russ Colchamiro. I write science fiction, fantasy, and mystery. And if you're looking for something to read by me, I recommend you check out Crossline, which is a space opera, time travel, action, adventure, and it does actually have a couple of badass moms themselves in this book as well. So I'm gonna sign off. Take care, everyone. I appreciate it, and tune in next week for the next one. Take care, guys. Thanks a lot.